everyone, my name is Dalton and welcome to my channel. Today I am going to be doing a book recommendation video. I'm going to be talking about books that I think are great to be reading around Halloween or in the October month. Um, these are books that are just like spooky, so they're either like a murder mystery or they just like give off like October-ish vibes, like ghosts or something like that. So these are just books that I think are great to read around October or around Halloween, just to really set the mood and get into an October Halloweeny vibe. So without further ado, let's get into the book recommendations. The first book that I'm going to mention is These Violent Delights by Micah Nemirever. I actually read this book this summer. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I did have some issues with it, but basically this follows a young boy who is in like college, freshman, sophomore of college. Honestly, it kind of feels like high school kids. I'm not gonna lie. They might actually be just like at a preparatory school, so it feels kind of like college, but they feel very young at times within this novel. And it basically follows him as he kind of starts this friendship with another boy that he goes to school with. And needless to say, these boys bring out the absolute worst in each other. Without going into any spoilers, it is called These Violent Delights for a reason. Basically, they come up with a game almost where they basically just describe how they could murder someone and get away with it. And they basically just like snowball this to find like the most violent ways to commit a murder and get away with it. I This book was written exceptionally well. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and honestly, that is mainly just because of the writing. I will say the story does get a little slow in the middle. Um, it picks up towards the end. I don't know if it's a great ending, to be honest, either. I thought it was just all right. I thoroughly did enjoy this book, though, and I do think because of what the main characters discuss, and the idea of murdering people and trying to get away with it, it does kind of fit for Halloween. Plus, where they're at, I think it's like somewhere in like New England. Actually, I think it might be Pittsburgh, and they mention like the foliage during October and the fall and that sort of stuff quite a bit, and it just sounds beautiful. It just kind of puts you in a fall vibe as well. So yes, this is the first book that I would recommend to read around this time of year. The next book I actually did not love, and that is the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. Like I said, I did not love this novel. I didn't particularly care for the main character or honestly the story that much, but it's about slaying vampires. How could it not be Halloweeny? You know what I mean? But basically, you follow a southern, wealthy-ish family, specifically the mom in that family, as she goes to book clubs, and these women kind of turn this Christian book club into a murder mystery sort of book club. And this kind of projects them into the realm of the fantastical after this one guy moves into their neighborhood, and they all, well, not all of them suspect him of being a vampire, but our main character suspects him of being a vampire. The story kind of goes from there. It's slow at times. Like I said, I did not love the main character. I didn't love the representation of Black people in this novel. I had quite a few issues with it, but if you are looking for a book that fits Halloween in October, this one, I mean, it doesn't get much better than this because it's vampires, they're trying to hunt him, it's a book club, like it's got a lot of things that fit the bill for October and Halloween. So that's why I figured I'd recommend it even though I did not love it. The next book that I'm going to talk about is kind of loose, I'm not going to lie, but that is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This book was everywhere a couple years ago when it first came out, but if you haven't read it, I would suggest that you read it during October or fall. So basically, if you don't know, our main character, Addie LaRue, essentially sells her soul to the devil to live forever and to get out of an arranged marriage. However, when she sells her soul to the devil, every time she meets somebody, as soon as she leaves them or a door closes, they instantly forget who she is. So she basically lives her life, like, I think it's like 300 years when we first meet her. She lives her life in absolute solitude with no one to remember her, except for the devil character. And honestly, the only reason I'm going to suggest it is because it's kind of got the devil in it. And he's like loosely a devil. It's kind of just like a god of some sort. He's not really defined as a devil. Um, but I thought this book was exceptional. It is probably my favorite book by V.E. Schwab. Again, I did have some issues with it. It does get a little slow about halfway through and a little repetitive, but I didn't really mind it that much because this is V.E. Schwab's best book. The writing in this novel is incredible compared to her other novels. And her other novels aren't poorly written by any means, but like compared to this, I mean, they're just not on the same level, honestly. But yes, read this book. I thought it was fantastic. I can see why people do have some other issues that I did not have, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. This is one of my favorite books of all time, and I actually just reread it, and that is The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson. Like I said, this is one of my favorite books of all time. I just reread it for funsies this year. It is a murder mystery on like a little remote island, so if you love like a murder mystery that takes place like in a small town or like is super like everybody's in like one place and it's very small, like how it could happen, like who could have done it. It's very small. But if you don't know, you're essentially following a financial journalist after he is um, charged of doing libel. He's charged of committing libel and trying to defame this super wealthy financer. And because of this, an old CEO of an old Swedish company, calls him one day and offers him a job to solve uh, this mystery that happened on this secluded island 40 years prior. Needless to say, he takes the job and crazy things happen from there. There's also a second main character in here, Lisbeth Salander. I love her as well. She is basically a hacker and she is just wild. And honestly, if you've ever read this story, she does some crazy stuff to somebody, but like it's fully like he deserved it. He had it coming and she did nothing wrong. So I cannot recommend this book enough. Hopefully before the end of the month, I will be able to read the next book. I don't think I'll be able to finish the trilogy just because I have some other things that I wanted to read as well. But I love this book and this trilogy so much. I can't recommend it enough. So the next book that I'm going to mention is actually nonfiction, and that is The Devil in the White City by Erik Larson. I read this book a long, long time ago, I believe in high school for an AP history class that I took. Um, and it might seem strange that I'm recommending nonfiction for a Halloween October TBR like recommendation video, but basically we follow a serial killer in this as he's committing like all these murders during the time of the Chicago World Fair. And while I'm not going to say that the Chicago World Fair chapters in this are boring, because there are some that are super interesting, just like them talking about building all the different buildings that they're going to do for it and that sort of stuff, building the Ferris wheel, all this architectural stuff and everything that goes into the Chicago World Fair, which I found quite interesting. Obviously, it's not as interesting as the murder parts, but you are following a man as he builds this hotel slash shop that basically is just designed to uh, welcome people into it and so he can literally just commit hundreds and hundreds of murders. It's wild. And the craziest thing is like it's all documented. This is nonfiction. So like we know that this man committed all these murders. It was such a good book. It's one of my favorite like nonfiction books that I've ever read. And if you haven't read it, I wholly recommend it, especially because of all the murders and serial killings and that sort of stuff going on in it. I think it would work pretty well for Halloween slash October. So this is another one that I think might be a little strange if you don't think about it in the context that I'm thinking about it. And that is Beloved by Toni Morrison. This is one of my favorite novels of all time. I wrote like my senior dissertation on this in college, and I just love this novel. If you don't know, it is following Sethi, who is an escaped slave who escaped to Ohio and basically murdered one of her children to remain free. And we're following her trauma of dealing with murdering her own child, of living life after being a slave. It's not a fun novel, to say the least. It's quite dark, but essentially, this baby's ghost is haunting their house until one day, one of the slaves that Sethi used to be enslaved with comes to her house, and all of a sudden this baby's ghost comes back as a full-grown adult. She comes back at 18, and we kind of just see Sethi dealing with the trauma of her dead child being in her life now for the first time. So I'm recommending it, one, because it's got a haunted house of sorts, and then it's got a ghost that comes back to life. Like, doesn't get much more Halloween or gothic than that. Obviously, it's not a fun read, like I said. I do fully love this novel. It won the Nobel Prize for Literature. It's such a great novel. The writing is fantastic. Everything that Toni Morrison writes is fantastic. But I would especially recommend it during like this season, just because it is gotta go. It does have a ghost and a haunted house, so it makes kind of sense, right? I'm telling myself it does. So, and then a Halloween recommendation video wouldn't be complete unless I mentioned something by Stephen King. So I'm gonna mention The Stand. Now, I have read quite a few of his novels at this point. I think like 5 or 6 maybe, which is a lot because I've read this one and It, which are like the two of his biggest. I hated It so much. I've hated every novel except for Carrie and this. This was actually my favorite. I believe I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I will say it's probably his least like horror novel. However, you follow the remnant of humanity after this super plague wipes out like 99% of the population. So you're just following a few people as they kind of navigate how how to exist when things like electricity, running water, food, all these things that you're so used to existing and not having to really deal with, I guess. Um, when all these things stop, how do you go about life? How do you rearrange your life to not have power, to not have food at a grocery store that you could just go to and pick up? And it's honestly, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't know what it is. I actually liked some of the characters in this more than I've liked any other of his characters. I felt like they were some of the most fleshed out characters he's ever written, which I mean, for a 1,300 page novel, the characters better be fleshed out, but I digress. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this. Like I said, I think it's my favorite one that he's ever written. It's also not super horrific. Obviously, there are a lot of bad things that happen in this novel. There is a plot that I'm not really going to mention because it's not, it is integral to the story, but it's just weird and convoluted. Honestly, I just read this for the main characters after I got attached to them. I could really care less about the evil person that comes through later in the novel, but whatever. Like I said, thoroughly enjoyed it. Can't recommend this enough. If you're going to pick up a Stephen King novel and you have the balls to read one of his longer ones, I would thoroughly recommend this over It or any of the other ones. So, Alright, guys, thank you so much for watching. Those are my recommendations for Halloween/October reads, just to get you in the mood for Halloween. If you have any other great recommendations, please let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Peace out. Bye.